This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host, and I'm joined by Dr. Richard Blackaby.
Thanks for having me again, Sam.
Well, it's
Can't thank you enough.
Hey, anytime you are welcome to come on your own podcast. We greatly appreciate those times that you keep showing up. I think every single episode so far.
And only you and I know what great lengths we've had to go to make sure that I am broadcast every week.
Yeah,
I was in South Africa recently, going to Thailand before long, and so some of those trips, you have to go through some great logistical gymnastics to make this possible.
You know, it's worth it though for you, Richard. Only for you. Well, you know, we've hit on some hot button issues before in the past, and today it looks like we're going to be taking a deep dive on another one of those.
Yeah, and you know, Sam, we've talked about this a number of times in different contexts, but I thought it might not hurt just to go back around to one of the issues that perhaps can get people as animated as anything I talk about, and that is anger. And there's a big debate sometimes, and I've mentioned this before, but if I ever talk about anger as if that's something we should try to suppress or eradicate from our life, there's always someone that immediately says, but Jesus got angry.
But the temple.
Yeah, the temple. He cleansed the temple, didn't he? And of course, as we've shared before, it doesn't actually say that Jesus was ever angry when he cleansed the temple. I think personally it was a prophetic act. He was making a statement. He was in a sense declaring war on the religious elite that had completely subverted what the purposes of the temple were. But that aside, I just know that if you ever just post something on social media about the fact that we need God just to free us from our anger, or that we need to try to be anger free, and I promise you will have people that will very quickly respond and tell you, well, anger is good, or we need to be angry about what's going on in our country today, or if you'd had the life I have, you'd be angry too, and so on. And Jesus was angry, and so if it just means you care, it just means that you're passionate about things, and
it matters.
And so it's interesting to me how much some people want to justify their anger.
Yeah. And
so I just thought we'd look at a couple of verses that talk about that. And one of those is James. Of course, tradition says it's Jesus' brother. He's the first kind of main pastor there in Jerusalem after Peter takes off. And James 1, verses 19 and 20, it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger."
That's a verse that, for as long as I can remember, my dad has quoted that verse.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Quick to listen. Be quicker to listen than you are to speak. I know so many people, their mouth just gets going right away, and it's obvious after a sentence or two that they have not really carefully thought about what they're saying.
Or listen to what.
Yeah, they just have what, and I tell you, if you've ever been kind of in an argument or a debate with someone, and it's almost as if you're having two entirely different conversations, because everything you say to them, they haven't heard a thing. They're just going to keep battering away at the same thing, and but then it says be slow to anger. Now, interestingly, it doesn't say don't be angry. It just says be slow to anger.
Yeah,
don't go there quick. Well, I don't know if that's what you were saying too.
Let it fester,
and so in a sense, what that might be saying is, there may be times where anger is legitimate, but don't let that be your go-to default, where the moment something happens, you're angry. If you're hot right away, if you're still in the midst of a conversation, but you're already angry and you haven't even heard everything yet, then be careful. And so it is kind of interesting because it says perhaps there is a place for anger, but don't go there very quickly. It should really, anger in a sense should be a last resort.
Yeah.
But then it goes on to say in verse 20, the reason for that, for human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. And, I think we really, really have to meditate upon that, because we often say, well, Jesus cleansed the temple, and let's give him even the benefit of the doubt that he was angry. But that was God's righteousness. That was God's temple. Jesus was the Son of God. He was sinless. He was perfect. And this was not about him. They were not insulting him. They were insulting his Father. They were robbing people of an opportunity to come to God.
Yeah.
And so this had nothing, in a sense, to do with Jesus personally. It was righteous anger. But what he's saying is, don't assume that your anger is righteous.
Yeah.
What you're experiencing is human anger, and that is not the same as God's righteousness. And I love how we tend to think that whatever makes us mad must be righteous.
Because, we're Christian after all. And so if we're upset about something, it's obvely,
Yeah. And if I'm angry, it has to be that I've been offended, and this is, this is something that I deserve to be angry about.
Well, what's interesting about that temple cleansing is his anger is directed at the people of God. It's, and I think when Christians today, and especially on social media, very rarely is their anger directed at the people of God. It's usually directed at the other political party or the world at large.
Yeah.
And it's
secular Hollywood or something else. But and so I think if you can be living your life the same way Jesus did, with a sinless heart, with a pure heart, and you're angry still, then perhaps it's righteous. But our problem is that we have a lot of stuff in us that is not righteous, and so when we get angry, we have an unrighteous anger. There's another passage in Ephesians 4, verses 26, and it says, "Be angry and do not sin." And so there you go.
You can be angry.
Yeah, be angry, just don't sin. But the moment that you say an unkind, cutting, hurtful thing in anger to someone, you've just sinned. You've just violated this. Now, we love to just embrace the first part and not the second part. And to say, and so I would, when someone says, well, I think my anger is righteous, then I would say, well, perhaps it is. Let me ask you, what kind of thoughts is that anger giving you toward that person? Is that anger causing you to love that person more? Is that anger causing you to want to be reconciled with that person more? Is that anger causing you to want that person to experience salvation, become your brother or sister in Christ? If your anger is causing you to wish that person just got fired, that they came down with a severe case of COVID, or they had all kinds of calamities come upon them, then I'm not guessing that your anger is causing you
to sin not.
To sin not. And so, so it's saying, if you can truly, honestly, and sin sometimes is not even just what you say or do. It's what you're thinking. It's your attitude. It's your heart. You're angry, and of course that's why Jesus said, some of you are committing murder in your heart. You in your heart, you wish the person was dead. You wish that they would experience harm. And it's the same as if you actually brought harm upon them. Then it's your heart. You've already committed sin in your heart. And so, but then it goes on and says, not only to not be angry or be angry, but don't sin. But then it says, don't let the sun go down on your anger, and don't give the devil an opportunity. Okay, so now we've got a time limit on anger here, because every night the sun goes down. So what is that telling you? Basically, if you're going to get angry, deal with it before you go to bed. The day of. Yeah, the day of. And so now, why would Paul say that? I mean, if it's okay to be angry, that's the thing for a lot of folks. They'll look at just that first part of verse 26 and say, well, they said it's okay to be angry, but then you say, but you've been angry for 3 months. Yeah. You've been ranting on social media for 3 months, and I'm guessing the sun went down a couple of times in the last 3 months, and you woke up just as angry as you went to bed that night. Paul says, if you're going to be angry, okay, there may be something that is worthy of your anger, and express it, properly deal with it. But when you go to bed at night, you need to be done with it. Take it to God, leave it with Him, and have a good night's sleep. And I think in part it's almost like, I read something or saw something on the internet the other day, which so it has to be true.
It must be.
But I think it was about Madame Curie, and she was dealing with a bunch of stuff that was radioactive, and kind of,
As she does.
yeah, and I forget now all exactly what she was dealing with, but it was very radioactive, and so apparently she was around radioactivity so much that her corpse was radioactive, and that they actually had to bury her in some kind of very special,
like lead coffin.
Like some kind of coffin, so that it's because you can kind of go to her gravesite or whatever, but it would harm people to be near her because she was around it so much.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's kind of what anger is like. You're dealing with radioactive, harmful material here, and if you stay around it very long, it's going to cling to you and it's going to consume you. And so in a very limited, specific kind of way, there might be something that is worthy of your anger, and that's fine if there is, and you can deal with it in a righteous way. But even if you do it righteously, at the end of the day, you've dealt with it. You've done your business. You've said what needed to be said, and now you need to put it away. But when the sun goes down, and I think that's just a great safeguard to say, okay, I had a few hours here to deal with this, to run through the course of my strong feelings, and now I just need to let it go. And I've kind of shared a little bit about that with this sunroom that we've built, and this crook, the crook that stole a lot of money from me, lied to me, kept my money, never did anything. And I'll tell you what, there was a night or two in bed when I get in bed and just be thinking about this guy and how he blatantly just robbed me of money that I could have used for so many other things. You might have inherited some of that money one day, Sam, but now it's gone to some thieving sunroomer. Yeah, now you're going to be angry. And I remember just thinking, I'm either going to get in bed every night and start thinking about this guy and then just be mad all over again. I don't know that that's going to affect him in any way, but it's certainly given me a rotten night's sleep, and I've got to let it go.
Yeah,
I've got to let it go. And I just can't keep being angry about that. It's done. I can't hit rewind. Can't do it over again. I've done what I can do, and at this point, I just refuse. That would just be really such a shame. He's already taken my money. Now he's going to take away my peace, my joy, my night's sleep.
Yeah, eventually start taking away your health. You know, like if you let that, if it goes long enough, he's going to rob everything.
Like I remember one time when I was a pastor, I met a woman that her husband had committed adultery on her and had treated her badly, for sure. But this woman was just obsessed with it. I mean, she literally, I watched her she came to see me in my office and she told the whole story, and it was heartbreaking. I felt sorry for her. But then I realized she told that story to everybody. I mean, she's going and buying a blouse at the store, and she's telling the checkout clerk and people sitting beside her on a park bench, or just anybody, or waitresses serving her food, and she's consumed by what her former husband had done to her. And years later, she got to the point nobody wanted to be around her. I remember one time I was in a restaurant with someone, and I saw her coming into the restaurant by herself, sat down at a booth on the other side of the restaurant. So I just noticed her. I thought, well, when I'm leaving, I may just say hi to her as I go. But then she got up to go to the bathroom or something, and she was gone for a while. And the waitress came in and thought that she must have left because she'd been gone so long. So she cleared off the table, and I thought, I kind of know she's gone. I assumed, I guess something came up. She left. But eventually she came back in, and all the tables been reset, and they're serving someone else. And I just thought, this poor woman, her whole life is just miserable. She's just, and I just thought, wow, she did have things. I'm sure she rightfully should have been angry when she found out her husband was committing adultery on her. But 10 years later, to still be nursing that anger was just making her a hollowed out, empty, bitter person that nobody wanted to be around. And so I think Paul just wisely says there are some times, and let me give you three quick ones, three reasons why you might be angry. One is it's truly a righteous anger. And I think I think if you see maybe the poor being oppressed, you see victims, maybe it's, single mom that's being exploited by a greedy landlord, or just maybe people just cheating. And there are a lot of people out there, if they don't think it could be a car mechanic who just charges you a ton of extra money for something that didn't even need to be fixed, but you don't know any better, and they tell you, well, we better go ahead and clean, change this for you, or boy, if this goes out, you could be stuck on the road, and you still have 30,000 miles to go before you need to look at that. But and so when you hear of people being exploited, or you hear about maybe children that are growing up in a supposedly Christian home, and then their parents just abandon the Lord. They claim to be Christians, but they're just being hypocrites in front of their kids, and now their kids want nothing to do with Christianity or church. And it can anger you to think those parents knew better. They knew the gospel, and they just got selfish, they got sinful, and now none of their kids want anything to do with God because of the way. And you think those poor kids, if they just had parents who'd stuck with the truth and done the right thing, then they would be walking with God today too. But so, there's lots of, or, you see a church that is, here it is in a community, it's the only church in the whole neighborhood, and they should be salt and light to their neighbors, but instead they're bickering and fighting and splitting over what color the carpet's supposed to be. And you just think, that can make you a righteous anger, where you say, so a whole community is going to be lost because this church cared more about the color of carpet than about taking the gospel into their neighborhood. And so there are some things I think it's legitimate to be passionately, even angry about, and say, these people are blind. These people have no clue what really matters here, what doesn't matter. And so, you turn on the news and you see dictators that, their people are starving to death, and the UN sends food in or something, and the dictator takes all the food and sells it to their friends for money and lets his own people starve to death. And you see stuff like that, and I think I think Jesus would be angry too if he saw some of that. But be careful how you deal with that. Because that's why some people have, taken guns and gone back and shot up places because they were so angry at how people were being oppressed or treated, and then it leads to sin. Second reason we get angry is because people just don't meet our expectations. We expected them to appreciate us, to thank us, to, be kind to us, whatever. And then they didn't do it. Or maybe we're a boss and we expected our employee to do the right thing and to work hard and come on time, and they didn't, and that made us angry. And so oftentimes our anger comes because people didn't do what we thought they should. And that frustrates us because we really want the world to operate the way we think it should. And if people don't, we get frustrated and even angry. And maybe a third category that I think often leads to anger is when we get hurt, when people attack us, when they mistreat us. And it's a natural response at times to get angry, that someone would insult me that way, that they would demean me that way. And, I think there can be a place for some anger. When someone, and there's lots of famous stories of where someone was told they'd never amount to anything, and they got angry, and that anger actually propelled them to work hard and study late and do their best, and they became, very successful, and they sort of channeled that anger into a positive response. And in time, usually they kind of got over the anger part and just used it as positive energy, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I think we just have to be aware that anger is radioactive, and unless you can channel it into a very positive action, and I think at the end of the day, you have to just hand that anger over to God and say, God, if there's a righteous response to this, then God, I'm going to need you to show me, and that, God, this is going to be your issue, not my issue. I'll play my part. I'll do what I can, but God, you're the ultimate judge here of right and wrong, not me. And I can't act as God in this universe because I just don't have the wherewithal to do that. It'll tear me up trying to bring about justice on my own. But I can trust that a day will come when you will make all things right. And so I just need to, in my own little way, my own little world, do what I can. But not do it with anger, because if you don't let that, if the sun goes down and you haven't dealt with it, every day that it remains in you, it's going to just embed itself ever deeply. And you and I both have known angry people, and no one really wants to be around angry people very long, except maybe other angry people.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Jesus did not minister. That was not characteristic of his ministry to do things out of anger. You don't see that. It's rare. Even if he was angry cleansing the temple, it was rare. That was certainly the exception, not the rule with Jesus and the way he lived his life. And so don't be too quick to rationalize, to justify your anger. When in doubt, probably better not to have anger than to have it. If you can do it and not sin, and to do it righteously,
do it slowly.
Good for you. Write a book and tell us all how to do that, because my anger tends to drift inevitably into unrighteousness, and so probably better to just not go there in the first place.
Yeah, it may not be the initial anger in the first place, but it's what actions follow that anger that get us into trouble. Well, thank you for reminding us to not be angry, and to, if we are going to be angry, do it slowly and with righteousness. And
when the sun starts to set,
exactly.
Put it away, file it away, be done with it.
This is as always a very apt reminder for us as we lead and as we live. So thank you again.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.